Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Authentic Podcast with Justin Douillard. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. It's time!
All right, we are back with another episode 42. Have Mr. Bill Courtney with me today. Bill, you are a retired New York police detective with 33 years of experience, notable for starting the priority targeting section, better known as the controversial Rap Police. So I wanted to lead off and ask, and I think I know the answer, but how did you end up in Tulsa after you retired from
Yeah, well, that's kind of a strange set of circumstances. I kind of grew tired of New York in decline again. And I have an apartment. I still have it, actually, in Manhattan. I passed it on to my daughter, but it's just in case I want to escape and go back. I have the option. But a friend of mine, Danny O'Connor, opened up the Outsiders House Museum here. I came out for the opening. And I met a lot of his friends, and everybody, there was a whole different vibe here, a real friendly vibe. The people I met were in club owners, musicians, people who were like, artistic and had different galleries and different things. And it was a really cool, like I said, it was a really cool vibe. And I immediately got introduced, I had a set of friends immediately, and that's something you don't get back east. And so I came back a few more times, said, you know what the hell, let's do it. So I went and found a place downtown, bought it, and I've been here a little over 3 years now. So, I miss the East Coast, I miss the ocean, I miss the food, but that's about it. I don't miss the circus, and so here I am.
I thought I had met you when I did the podcast with Danny. You probably don't remember, but
in
I
the
came
house,
by the
was
house.
it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And I remember him telling me, "Yeah, my buddy Bill's coming by. He moved. I got him to move. I think you were maybe visiting at the time, or
just
maybe you
moved
had just
out
moved.
or something." Yeah.
But he basically said he talked you into moving out here. With that said, how do you know Danny?
How do I know what?
How do you know Danny? How did you guys?
So Danny, I think you probably know Danny's story, but Danny is friends with a lot of cops, believe it or not. And so I met him through a retired lieutenant from the NYPD and a retired detective who was actually active at the time from LAPD. And they had a little thing going where they called it Delta Bravo Exploration. I guess the DB is for Danny Boy. But they would go and find old movie film locations and do all sorts of cool shots, try to get access, talk to the people inside and stuff. So I had been interested in that and kind of an expert on locations in New York from going up there. And so that was the intro. And, that was, I guess, started the ball rolling.
So based on your resume and the podcast you're starting in the series, you seem to be somewhat friends with people that you have formerly arrested or have been acquainted with in the crime world. My biggest question, is that common for police officers to have that relationship, or are you kind of a unique individual?
I would say I'm unique. There's a crew of us out there who, well, I guess the way it starts, it could be an informant. A lot of informants walk in the door. They want to give up an adversary, or they're in a jam. Maybe it's ego, whatever. And sometimes those relationships can be maintained, but usually they're short-lived. But the way I developed these relationships is I was a member of several federal task forces. Primarily, I guess my longest run was with the DEA in New York. And then I did a few years with the Bureau. And I worked in a lot of federal task forces with so many agencies, the Violent Apprehension Squad. But the way I started maneuvering through the federal system was, and being a case maker, was, taking shots at different organizations and trying to get people to flip, arresting them on the lesser charges. that they were doing in part of like a structured organization. It could be credit card fraud, different things, and picking people who were probably like violent predicate felons, or at least had numerous felonies. And in the federal system, due to the minimum mandatory sentencing, they were going to have to do, long sentences, and then convincing them to cooperate. And once a person decides to cooperate with the government, it's a long process. They get put in special housing, which is basically they're isolated. Their families start having issues where they think they're being followed, they're getting threats, and you basically adopt a dysfunctional family that you have to deal with. And there's a closeness that comes from constantly taking that person out of the prison situation into interview rooms and going over the case over and over again, bringing them back out because you want some clarity. What did you hear on the streets through your telephone calls from the correctional facility? And then the afterlife, if they go into witness protection, there's usually a blackout period. They may or may not contact you, depending on how serious they take the program. And then those who opt out of the program are usually eager to relive the old days. They can't talk to their old friends anymore.
And you're saying they want to get back?
Well, they want to talk to us. They don't have anyone else to talk to. They really can't. They can only maybe reach out to one of those best friends who's not going to give them up. But when you go in the program or you go into hiding, it's stressful, and it's limited the amount of contact you can have with people. And then there are some guys who went back to the streets. They weren't afraid for whatever reason. And I maintain those relationships. Sometimes I sign them up as informants. So they had protection, and other times, they would just call up and say, hey, you know what I heard? This guy's dead, or this guy got shot. And so it's a certain personality, you have to have. People have to like you, you have to like them. And there's plenty of people I dealt with that I prayed I never heard from again. And then there's the guys that just have the right personality. They're sociopaths, but they're similar to us, and they love their kids and families. We have a lot in common, except we choose to make money a different way.
Yeah, you said that a lot of the people you arrested or took down, they almost understood that it was part of the business, that
Sure.
you were just doing your job and they were doing theirs, and that's just part of it.
Yeah, I matter of fact, it's funny. I grabbed a guy in a hotel room, the Lowe's Hotel, Miami Beach. He was in bed with a girl. We hit the door, and she started carrying on. And he said the old, hey, they're just doing their job. Stop. Gentleman gangster kind of stuff. And that's the people that you want to arrest. The people who, they're leaders. They realize it's a business, and there's no reason to be adversarial in those situations. That doesn't do anybody any good. So those are the kind of crimes and organizations I like to go after. But of course, you got to start off a lot of times with the bottom feeders, the guys at the bottom who are just killers, who are just low-level hangers-on, and that's how you build your case and go up. So.
Now, I think before we started on live, you mentioned, from what I think I understood, that the traditional mob is almost going to be obsolete soon, or it is obsolete. Was that correct? Or?
Well, to a great degree, organized crime has been decimated by the use of the RICO statutes, which probably started in earnest back around 1980 with Rudy Giuliani when he was a U.S. attorney in the Southern District. And, if you're part of a structured organization, that there's a de facto leader and lieutenants and, you're in a gang and you commit violence and you say you're in a gang and there's a leader of the gang, you're in a structured organization, and those laws apply, and the sentencing is brutal. So, nobody wants to be a made man, because if you're once you get made, you've really entered into a conspiracy. So that's been a big problem for the mob. And then, crime has changed. There's plate readers everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. People have cell phones. It's so hard to get away with things. Can you imagine you put a body in a trunk and you're driving around, they probably snagged your tag, at least in New York City, maybe 50 times driving 10 miles.
And everyone's got a camera in their hand.
Yeah. So, it's a tough, the world's tougher. So it's chased a lot of the crime into the digital age, different kinds of fraud. But, they're still out there. There's still mobsters, trying to deplete, the health and welfare fund from a union, or, that's always been their kind of bread and butter, was unions and construction. So they're still out there. They're just a little bit more quiet. And the wars had killed the 5 families. They fought with themselves. They fought with each other. And it brought nothing but negative attention, and aided in the kind of end of the Italian mafia in New York.
I try to hit some of the questions that I get from people as we go down on that note. Seems like you've had a lot of experience with both traditional mob and modern day gangs. Mm-hmm. Any major differences there, or any preference when working with those people? Is that a whole different life, or are they similar, just a different dynamic group?
Well, there seems to be more loyalty in the mob. They have a structure. If you're an associate and you want to become a made member, you're kicking up, you're doing, everything you can to become an active member. So you're doing everything you can out in the street. You're kicking up as much money as you can, so you're noticed and appreciated as a money earner. Once you get made, which is very difficult, usually you have to kill somebody or be a big earner. Once you get made, now you have status. Nobody out in the street can touch you. No one can touch your family. It's a big deal, and then they're always trying to get their hands on, the bigger scams, the more money, the code of silence, you can't cooperate, it's so then you go to urban neighborhoods where, there might be like 4 or 5 gangs within one housing project. They might be warring with each other. It's a little less structured in those situations. I find that the gangs out west are a little bit more structured, but they seem to be in a constant state of violence with beefs and different things. So there's a lot more kind of, I don't want to say out in the open, but more obvious acts of violence that you can pick up on, and and that would kind of attribute to your way into making a conspiracy case on them. But yeah, no, there's differences, but they're in the street gangs are enamored with the mob too, whether they're black, Hispanic, or Armenian, or Albanian. They all kind of they like that respect you get from being a mobster. And if you want to be a mobster, you want to be an Italian mobster. Let's face it, it's got the best movies, the best history. And they had the longest and best run than any other organized group that I can think of. So,
where do you think our fascination with true crime comes from, as far as people not involved in crime or gangs? Like, I don't know, I was born in 90, you were working in 90, but right. Was true crime a big thing on TV back then? Or is it something that has been the past 20, 30 years?
I think these shows, first it was probably like Cops. And then you started getting, like these 48-hour type shows, 1 or 2 hour special, leaves you hanging on every, in the commercial, and you think the case is dead, and then they come back with, another thing that leads them further and further towards an arrest and a conviction. Those shows, I think, became popular in the 90s. I don't remember them.
I do remember Cops as a kid, watching Cops.
Yeah, I mean, Cops is all street stuff, and I think they saw there's a market here. And then, there's people that just love this stuff, these, forensic shows and stuff. And that's not my thing. I like, I like I like to know the stories behind people and the, and the organized kind of stuff, because it's more interesting. The different types of scams, like you wouldn't believe how many different scams are out there. It's just amazing how, inventive people can be when they want money.
Yeah, I almost got scammed around Christmas time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, someone got into my bank and had added an external account and then they tricked me in calling me, acting like it was my bank, but they called from my bank's number, quote unquote, showed up on my phone. It blew my mind. But can you tell us a little bit about how you got into being a police officer and what led you to do that?
Yeah, so I grew up in New York, and I was born in '62. My dad was a cop. I was surrounded by cops most of my life. We vacationed with other families who were members of law enforcement. I think when I was about 10 years old, my father was on the cover of the Daily News behind a car with a couple of guys shooting up at a building. There was a sniper or something. You know, New York was one of those cities that was in complete disarray at the time. High crime. The city was bankrupt. We had serial killer. We had numerous acts of arson in the poorest sections of New York that decimated the Bronx and areas in Brooklyn. And then you had like these, so then I had the positive side of it for my family, but then you also had really good cop movies back then. The French Connection, or a really great film, and this is, it didn't inspire me, but it certainly, I carried that film with me for a long time, was a movie called The Seven Ups, and it was produced by a guy named Sonny Grasso, who the film The French Connection was based on. And he's basically, you know, good-looking guy, leather jacket, driving a police car 100 miles an hour, shooting bad guys, and, you know, that's the life I wanted to live. I was like, man, I wish I could be that guy. And unfortunately, when you become a cop, you'll see that's a hard, you know, one, it's not like that, and two, it's a hard road to get to that level where you're a plainclothesman with an unmarked, undetectable, you know, kind of cover car, and but it is attainable, but in very, you know, small amounts of the investigators that are out there.
So how did you become the guy that started what they call the controversial rap police?
So I was assigned to the DEA. I was assigned to a Colombian team, and we made huge seizures of cocaine, powder cocaine. I was assigned to a Colombian group.
Are you an undercover guy? Or
no, we're just investigators. But, you know, we had high-level informants. Some of them walked into the embassy, maybe in Cali, or came and approached the government, particularly maybe, let's say, the DEA, and said, hey, look, I know where there's huge amounts of money. And they would give up stash houses, and they would be rewarded very well. And so we were doing really big cases. I think the first year I got there, we seized about 700 kilos of cocaine. The next year it was about 1,000. And then in 97, we seized over 2,500 kilos of cocaine that year, millions of dollars, cars, businesses. And it was a lot of fun. It's a cat and mouse game. You're putting tracking devices on cars. You're getting up, you're listening to their telephones, using translators for the most part. And you're out in the street and people are calling you, say, hey, they're on the move. They're supposed to meet with some guy. He sounds important. And now you're out there with 6, 7 guys following people through the urban streets of New York, trying to keep up with them, trying not to get made. It was a lot of fun. Somewhere along the line, I got up on a telephone that was supposed to be dealing with a source of supply from Colombia. It was a Dominican male, and he was basically on his way down. He had a lot of problems, and he was dealing with drug dealers in Brooklyn who were affiliated with different rap artists, who were protected by drug gangs or tough guys. And
is this Haitian Jack?
Well, no, Haitian Jack actually was a robber. Haitian Jack robbed drug dealers, but he's memorialized in different songs. I think one by Tupac, one by 50 Cent. But yeah, you know, so there's this world that I was kind of fascinated that existed. And I made a decision that I kind of wanted to leave the world of high-level, multi-kilo investigations and start looking at these guys on the streets. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of rap beefs going on where, you know, guys would be waiting outside a radio station for the artist to come out, and you know, sometimes the two different factions, they'd be, you know, having shootouts. You know, an argument might start off one of these diss songs and turn into something, you know, really volatile with numerous acts of violence. But I saw that there were a lot of guys who were kind of terrorizing people in the rap industry, whether they were producers, whether they were artists. And they got their start in New York. Most of them will come from Brooklyn, but they were stash house robbers. They would go and rob drug dealers. They'd steal their drugs. They'd steal their money. And we're talking significant amounts of cash. And there was nothing you could do about it because, one, you're in an illegal trade. And two, these guys were so fierce, and so their reputation and actions put drug dealers in fear. And so it was kind of, only natural that they would now see an opportunity for this, opportunity to extort, whether it's the friendly extortion game or the all-out give me money or I'm going to, make your life miserable. And some of the big players in New York would be a guy named Haitian Jack, Jimmy Henchman, a guy Walter Johnson, whose street name was, what was his? Tut, King Tut. He was so crazy, he robbed his own congregation, a Jehovah's Witness church in Brooklyn. He robbed the entire congregation on one Sunday.
He went to church there and then robbed them?
Yeah, well, his family went to church there, and he was a sociopath. So I guess he had fled from the flock and decided to return. So these guys were really bad guys. And the rappers initially, people like Tupac and the early guys out on the street, they came from the same streets that these guys were legends in. And at first, I think they liked it to have these guys around. Their music was about surviving the streets, hustling to survive. And these guys were like, you can't sing about us. You're not a hustler. You're nobody. You want to sing about us, you got to pay homage to us. Give us cash, take care of us, tickets to the show. We're going to come hang out with you. You're going to be in the club buying stuff. And, if I like that $100,000 Rolex on your wrist, I'm probably going to take it from you. So, and then, one guy in particular who was Haitian Jack, he kind of, he had some charm. He'd be in places like Star Island in Miami Beach area at all the hot clubs. He dated Madonna for a bit. He started to legitimize himself to a point, and he was known as a guy that if you had problems, you could go to Jack and he would take care of them. But that relationship came at a cost. He was going to ask you for money. He was going to ask you maybe to help manage an artist, to invest, some kind of investment where he was involved. But basically it was just to, drain people of their money and give him, a significant kind of, introduction to the industry. He insinuated himself into it, and he did very well. But he was still, a street guy, got into a lot of beefs. When people asked for help, he helped them, and usually with acts of violence. So he was kind of a more notorious guy in the industry, and I had arrested him on a couple of occasions. And the first time I arrested him because he was a violent predicate felon before he could get citizenship. His family was from Haiti. Excuse me. And, I told him, you're either going back to Haiti or you're going to, help us out with what we need. And, he had no other choice. And then he didn't really so much act as an informant, but as somebody I kept close, kept an eye on, and occasionally would ask for a favor, like a telephone number of another bad guy who I was looking into, but I never wanted to burn him. But he broke the rules and got into a shootout.
Small infraction.
Yeah, in West Hollywood. And there was a witness who knew who he was. And then I started getting calls, and I was like, oh no, here we go.
This is in the 90s?
No, this was probably Jack's final end in the United States was probably around 2005, maybe 2006, something like that.
Okay.
But his rise probably comes out in the early 90s. It's hard thinking back on when rap got really big, but he kind of was one of the early guys in the industry he was really tight with Tupac, and what happened is everywhere Tupac went, they were there. And what they were getting out of him at the time, I don't know. I don't think Tupac particularly had a lot of money back then, but whatever he had, I'm sure he was, pretty loose with. And, these guys saw an opportunity. But what happened is they invited some girl from a club back to a hotel room. It was Jack, Tupac, one other guy whose name I forget, and one guy I think who was never identified.
This is in California?
No, it was in New York. This is the early days. And the girl was either raped or sexually assaulted, but they were arrested. And Jack chose a lawyer named Paul Brenner. Paul was a defense attorney. He also did a lot of cases for the different police unions in New York where cops needed a lawyer because, they had been arrested for maybe being overzealous or in an arrest or maybe an off-duty situation like a DUI. And so he had that reputation. And Paul told Jack, you better take a plea. And he did. And Tupac just was mad that I think he maybe he set this girl up, but maybe he felt that, he kind of talked himself into being somewhat innocent, which isn't true, but, and that these bad guys, they're the ones who are the real bad guys, and they're the ones who should be, taking this to trial just like me. And Jack took a plea. And then Tupac went out and said, hey, he's got a cop attorney. He must be a rat, which wasn't true. And just before his sentencing, Tupac went to a club and met a writer named A.J. Benza and told him some stuff, probably, not in confidence, but just in a normal part of a conversation. And it went into print. It basically alleged that all his troubles came about with this guy, Haitian Jack, and Mike Tyson had warned him about him and that he was out of his league. He shouldn't be hanging with these guys. And they got me jammed up. So he is found guilty. He's supposed to go for sentencing. And before he goes for sentencing, he wants to make a little extra money. He's got to pay off lawyers. He needs some money out there for his, his girlfriends, his mother, whoever. And so he goes to do a track for a guy named Little Sean at a place called Quad Studios. And when they get there, they're met in the lobby by some gunmen who start to rob Tupac. They want to take his watch, different things. Tupac goes for a gun, shoots himself in the groin a couple of times. These guys open fire. I don't even know if they hit Tupac, but they did hit another individual who was there. And they flee with some stuff. And the reason that happened was it was just supposed to be a robbery, maybe a smackdown, to teach him a lesson that you can't throw guys' names around like Haitian Jack. The robbery supposedly, allegedly, was ordered by a guy named Jimmy Henchman, who was a cohort of Jack's. So, these guys never cooperated. Police put together what they could. Years later, more and more information came out about it. And, it's funny, Jimmy Henchman ends up becoming a manager. And he managed people like The Game, who was a pretty big artist. And he ended up inevitably was a manager who was also a cocaine trafficker and also a violent guy. And he got into this whole rap beef thing with 50 Cent and numerous acts of violence, murders, shootings. And it was a mess. So he's serving life in prison now. Jack is, after the shooting he was involved in, I don't even know if I talk about that, but he was supposed to be a good boy, and he was supposed to report to me, anything that he that law enforcement would be interested in, and he really didn't do that all that much, and never really acted as an informant. But he was with a rapper named MC Light one evening. Some guys he had a beef with were in a club called Monroe's. They had words. He took MC Light outside, came back in and shot them.
Haitian Jack shot them?
Yeah, Haitian Jack shot them in the legs to teach them a lesson, So there was an informant outside who I knew, actually. I had met. He was being controlled by somebody else, by an LA sheriff I knew. And he said, Haitian Jack just chased these guys around the Club Monroe's and shot them. So he called me, and I was like, oh, Jesus, what are we going to do now? So, I had to get Jack to come in. And so I didn't want to call him like the day after. So I let it float for 2 or 3 weeks, let him feel comfortable. And then I told him, hey, I need you to come out into LA. I got some stuff, pictures I want you to look at and different things. And he came out, and we jumped him in the lobby of a Hyatt hotel on the Sunset Strip. And he pled out to, I think, a gun charge on that case with the knowledge that he was going to be deported.
Now, why were you in LA?
Well, I used to do cases, the NYPD, we never really thought we had borders per se. So, we followed people all around the country. We met with different law enforcement or, agencies all around the country, or we just went out and did our own thing places. Mostly surveillance, mostly to question people about, different leads we had. But I had teamed up with a guy named Mark Gaiman from the LA Sheriffs. He was a detective with the Major Crimes Bureau. We hit it off. We had a lot of fun doing cases together. And we kind of combined our efforts to investigate organized crime in the film, television industry, and music industry. So we really had the intelligence we had from both sides was great. And we had a lot of good times out there, a lot of good cases. And I think that one case we did together, which had different facets and sections to it, but I think it lasted about 7 years. So I was flying back and forth from New York to LA a lot, sometimes Miami. That was probably our second most popular stopover point. And a lot of times we wanted to see with rappers who they were running around with. Sometimes we knew that a guy in an organization maybe had a warrant out for his arrest, and we'd pull over their cars to find the guy, look around the vehicle where the guy was, maybe try to flip him, try to get intel on what was going on. So, we were busy nonstop. There was shootings all the time outside of radio stations, outside of events. The silliest beefs in the world, turned into violence because these guys needed protection from guys like Haitian Jack and Jimmy Henchman. So they had all sorts of bad guys from their hood with them, and it caused nothing but trouble. The industry got real. What happened, though, is when Tupac got out of prison, he got bailed out by Suge Knight while he had an appeal. And Suge brought him over to Death Row Records, and Suge wanted to keep him as an artist. So, he would get Tupac fired up about how the New York guys robbed him and made a fool out of him. And so Tupac started doing these diss tracks where he was calling out gangsters in New York by name, and it started to get ugly. The guys from Bad Boy Records, which is Puffy's label, decided not to really get into it, but other rap groups in New York weren't, standing for it, and they started to go back and forth. So, it just was constantly, there was problems everywhere. So if you had like the Source Awards, the Vibe Awards, all these guys would show up. They all had beefs. They all had guys in their entourage who weren't particularly good people. And so it was nonstop violence. And it kind of ends with the murders of Tupac and Biggie within about a year of each other. And, that was the beginning of law enforcement really looking into these guys and trying to quell the violence. And, so there's so many interesting cases and things. And, but it's not like it used to be. There's still beefs, but I don't hear about the violence that used to go on. So it's changed to a certain degree.
You think people are still maybe now beefing per se, but not so much violence and maybe not so much true acts, more of just for entertainment purposes?
Yeah, well, the industry has changed so much. Record labels don't really control these guys so much anymore. There's a lot of independent labels. It's so much easier now to have a budget to record something. The digital age has changed it. There's changed things so much that there's less startup money.
You can do a lot of it on your own.
Yeah, what happens is they still have people running around with them. Everyone wants to take care of their friends they grew up with, and their egos get the best of them. But the one war that was really bad war that I got involved in was between 50 Cent and the artists at Murder Inc. Records, and I ended up doing a case that led to a death penalty RICO case in the Eastern District of New York. Basically what would happen is 50 Cent was, low-level street kind of dealer.
This is before he was big, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. This is, South Jamaica, Queens. I don't even know whatever it is. It's got to be, I guess, mid to late 90s or so. He starts to become, a guy who's selling a lot of mixtapes out on the street, is making a name for himself. He put out a diss track called How to Rob, and the song goes into detail about how he was going to rob all these different members of these popular artists in the rap industry, making fools out of making fun of them. And they were all mad and wanted revenge and started singing about him. So it was a great public relations technique in that it propelled him overnight into stardom, but he still didn't have a record deal. So there was a record label called Murder Inc. Records, and they paid homage to one of the most famous street narcotics distributor named Kenneth Supreme McGriff, and he had a very violent drug trafficking organization called the Supreme Team.
This was a gangbanger or a rapper?
No, McGriff I wouldn't call him a gang member, although it was somewhat of a gang, but he was a multi-kilo drug trafficker who also controlled different housing projects in Queens, New York that distributed crack cocaine. He made, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, I'm sure, and had some really violent guys in his organization. And he went to jail for a bit. When he came out, these guys from Murder Inc. Records, Irv Gotti, his artist Ja Rule, Shanti, different people,
Joe?
They were enamored with him. He's a street legend in New York. And so, yeah, hey, come hang out with us. And, it's nice to have a guy like that with those street creds that, prevents you from being preyed upon. The problem was that 50 Cent didn't respect Supreme. He warned him to stop taking shots at his label's artist, Ja Rule. They had a number of street beefs, and different things happened. And after he refused to comply with McGriff and kept going after Ja Rule, McGriff and several of the men waited for him one day. I think they got tipped off, but they ended up shooting him 9 times. They thought he was dead, and he ended up surviving. And that's when I began to realize that, when I started getting tips about it, that Supreme and this record label were out of control. The label had to know what was going on. They were on top of their game, and why they would ever hook up with this guy, at least at the level they did, and let him handle a rap beef with violence is insane. And it brought heat onto the company. And the cases we did on Murder Inc. Records and Supreme basically decimated the label. It ruined the careers of Ja Rule, Ashanti, Cadillac Ta, all these different people on the label, because the industry knew that they were responsible in some way for the shooting of 50 Cent, threatening other labels that if they gave 50 Cent a recording contract, they would do things to them, whether it was business, they would sever business ties. get them blackballed, or maybe even bigger, like threats to them, threats of violence. So so that's a beef that turned into a record label losing everything, losing their stature in the industry, destroying their artist's career. And it ended up with me putting McGriff in jail, and his prosecution, his successful prosecution, led to life sentences. And so he's done. The record label is done. And it's a testament to why you don't invite bad guys into your life, So
the night that 50 Cent got shot, were you part of the team that arrested?
No. So we were doing long-term investigations. We were like, a bit more sophisticated. We're not street guys per se. We all came from the street as young cops and street detectives doing like, robbery squad work and things like that. But no, this is all long-term investigations. The use of informants, arresting people on the bottom and building a case and getting to the truth of what happened.
So yours is a long-term goal.
Oh, yeah. I think that case started in 2000. We didn't finish it. The conviction didn't come about until I think 2006. So you dedicated...
The shooting of him? The shooting of him? Or which conviction?
No, a RICO case that included the shooting and some murders and drug trafficking and other acts. So,
am I making this up, or on one of your podcasts, did you say that 50 Cent would not comply?
Oh yeah, no, he did not want to. He did not want to cooperate at all.
What is that? What is cooperate with? What? Like if someone
the
shot
investigation. Can
you elaborate more on?
I'm a victim, but I live by the code of the streets. Thank you, I appreciate your help, but no, I'm not going to tell you anything. So, and it's true. If he had cooperated with us, his career would have been dead, and that would have been the end of it. So.
Because he would have been considered an informant, or
a rat or whatever. So even if you get shot, you can't talk.
Wow, props to him for I don't know. I feel like it would end for me when I almost died. That I'd be like, all right, I got to switch now. But of course, that changed his whole life.
Yeah. Well, he's tough. He's a tough kid, and he's a smart kid, and he reinvented himself several times. He made really good investments. He's producing television shows now.
Yeah, he's doing everything.
Yeah, I mean, he's smarter than the guys who tried to stop his career. And once that album, Get Rich or Die Trying, came out, that was it. He was a legend after that. And, he's got a good reputation. He can be a bit of a pain in the ass. This guy, Tony Yayo, is with him, is another guy who's always shooting his mouth off. But they got good personalities in a way, it's, they make the whole kind of industry thing a little interesting. But in the past, they were also involved in a lot of violence because a lot of people were going after them, whether it was to attempt to extort from them, or whatever. Those guys survived a lot of different shootings and different things. When people see 50 Cent on TV, they don't necessarily know how many times those guys survived being shot at by guys like Jimmy Henchman, another guy, World, who was really big in Brooklyn, shot it out with them one night. A lot of violence in that industry, and it's all kind of gone. You hear about stuff occasionally. You hear about rappers who are involved with drug guys and different things, thinking that they're, some of them are legitimate, street guys who have a gift in the rap industry. But, if you don't walk away from that life, it's going to come back and haunt you. So.
Were you ever chasing these guys and investigating these guys long term, but listening to the music that they're putting out at the same time?
Yeah, so.
If you're even a rap guy.
Yeah, no. So I'm a big music guy. I have an eclectic taste in music, and I always kind of like groups like. 50 Cent. I thought that one album he did was great, but I liked these really crazy bands like NWA. Singing about all this violent stuff. I didn't necessarily like their sentiments about the police, but they looked cool. They the songs were they were violent and crazy, but they were doing something much different than anyone else. And there's groups like Public Enemy, Wu-Tang Clan. They're very interesting people. And they're singing about things that are somewhat interesting, life on the streets, things that I knew about. And there's people in the industry I don't like, that I've heard them speak. I've done cases where they've come up in not necessarily anything I could prove, but I didn't like them. I thought they were bullies or stupid or whatever. Guys like Fat Joe, Benzino, they all talk shit. Excuse my French.
Sure.
And so I had my favorites, but the law is the law, and if we had a crime, we were going to try to get you. So
I always found it interesting too, because it seems like you'd be the type of guy as well that doesn't hold that against these people to an extent, because clearly they grew up very differently than you did, and maybe had a big reason at one point to hate the police, and maybe they were taught that at a young age. And clearly that's probably not correct, but you grew up, it sounds like, with a good mentor and a police officer family, where these guys might have grown up with people who were arrested by the police or doing things that...
Yeah, well, yes and no. Yes, they grew up much different. So,
like Ice Cube, for example.
Well, Ice Cube was kind of a middle-class kid.
Was he?
Yeah. Ice Cube went to like a good school and everything else, but yeah, he's a bad example, actually, because he is one of those guys that
he seems like he's changed a lot now too.
Well, it's not like he really changed. I don't think he was never really a street guy doing bad things or anything like that. He certainly could sing about it. He lived near it or in it, but he wasn't a gangbanger, really.
So why would he be a part of the groups, writing F the police?
Because it's entertainment, and maybe it's the way he felt. But the thing is this, is that, in the urban environment, poor neighborhoods where a lot of rap comes out of, not necessarily the majority of it, but a lot of it comes out of there. And, people who live in poverty sometimes see the drug economy as a means to get out. The police are the enemy. They're coming in, they're going to try to arrest you. They're going to try to put you in jail, and want you to get the appropriate sentence for your crimes. And you don't necessarily have to be a bad person and be in that crime into crime, but you're accountable. And so when you get caught, you're gonna do the time. And in that era, there was a lot of money to be made out on the street doing it. I don't think they thought about the consequences, that you were ruining people's lives who were using the drugs. There was a lot of violence attached to their drugs. You can get robbed. You could have competition from other drug dealers, street beefs, shootouts, the jail time. And it's a game that you'll lose unless you get out one day and decide never to return. But so also the police in poor neighborhoods are the representatives of the government. And they're pissed off at, a lot of the lack of maybe what they perceive to be services and different things that they should have. They're frustrated. And, the police are an easy target for their animosity towards the government. You can't sing songs like, F the mayor, so, you know what I mean? So it's those guys who are busting your chops.
Screw the fireman.
Yeah. So anyway, but sure, I get it. I think everyone gets it. But you know what? No matter what, you're accountable for your actions on the street. And there's always going to be a case where a cop goes overboard, and then they think all the cops are overboard all the time. And, it's not really legitimate. And while I'll always defend the police, because I knew that 99% of the guys I worked with were honest. And, people make mistakes and things happen. But for the most part, guys didn't go to work looking to violate people's civil rights and things like that. Some guys were wilder than others, for sure. Same thing goes for bad guys. Some guys are gentlemen. Some guys just, they want to run. They want to fight over the most, the silliest of things and low level crime. So, we could criticize each other on both sides of the law, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I think that things have changed for the better. I think, there's a lot of political things, at play where people try to exploit tragedies, and, it's just kind of silly. People fall for it on both sides. And, but cops and street guys and, EMTs, people are out there, they know what really goes on. And they should actually ask us our opinion. We'd be able to put things straight too. We know what works, social services, and what doesn't. And, unfortunately, politicians and academics seem to run the world, and they don't know what it's like out on the streets. So
that's probably the best short answer you could have ever given. Like, well, you can't write a song called F the Mayor, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be the police.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your show. It's pretty new.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. So I guess I only, I always had the idea. Years ago, I guess in about 2010.
What year did you retire?
I retired. So I retired in 2007. I went overseas for a bit and I worked in the Middle East. I came back a couple of years later and I started working for different investigative agencies and task forces for the city of New York. Most of them involved organized crime in construction, private sanitation, unions, things of that nature. So I got back in the game, but at a different level, and I was a boss for most of it. I ran the investigative unit for one agency for a pretty long time. And
this is after retiring.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, so 25 with the PD, and then another 7 or 8 with these other guys. And they were task forces. We had the NYPD, we had feds working with us. And, we had money to do a long-term investigation. So I stayed in the game and started doing a lot more Italian mob cases, Genovese family cases. So with that being said, with that experience, with the amount of people I cooperated, the amount of people who I maintained relationships with on the good side and the bad side, I decided that, all these shows that are out there now with these mobsters and all these guys are now talking about old beefs that happened in the rap industry. I have so much inside stuff that will kind of really, wake up the neighborhood when I start talking about it. So I started off slow. My first show was, it's called The Proffer. A proffer agreement in the federal or state systems means law enforcement prosecutor invites a potential, a person of interest, usually a defendant who's already arrested, and gives them the opportunity to sit down and talk with immunity, that they can say anything they want in that room and it can't be used against them with one exception, and that is if they change their story, if they testify on the stand and tell a different story that they told that day, then we can reveal that there was a proffer and that that's not what they said the first time around. So I had done so many proffers. I mean, I don't even know how many I did over the years, trying to flip guys, getting guys to flip. And,
When you say flip, you're saying like become an informant?
Yeah, to cooperate with the government, to either testify, give information. And anyway, so, I saw that all these guys in organized crime, now they have their own shows. They're all, some of them are legit gangsters. Some of them are nobodies. Some of them fabricate stories. Others tell the truth. Most of them cooperated. That's how they are able to speak freely to their past, because they have coverage for their past crimes. Then there's a few guys out there who don't, who just taunt these guys, call them rats and everything else. But I say for the past 2 or 3 years, this has really kicked off big. They have huge followings. They're generating a lot of income on YouTube, Patreon, public appearances, and most of them are full of shit. So I know guys who aren't, and I decided that, it would be more interesting to have a show with a seasoned investigator or agent and a real crook, a real mobster. And when we have these conversations, I know exactly what they're talking about with terminology. I know a lot of the players they're talking about. And I can add to the conversation. You can tell me about an incident, and I can tell you, well, one of the guys who was there, I had a case on and whatever. So Right now we have about 5 or 6 in the can, and we put 2 out. The first one is an old friend of mine who was an assistant to David Chase on the television show The Sopranos, and he has a really great story about the ins and outs of the program, and not the program, meaning the television show. Really interesting stuff. It sticks with the mob crime kind of thing, the theme. And the second show that I put out was about the Biggie and Tupac investigation. My knowledge and was used by LA with a lot of street guys I knew. We whether it was one of the guys responsible for Tupac's death, who was a New Yorker, or just, sharing intelligence. The episode we did with Detective Greg Kading, retired from LAPD, gives you the inside and out of those 2 homicides. So it's of great interest now because Puffy was a part of that investigation. He's in all sorts of trouble, and a guy named Keefe D was recently arrested by the Las Vegas Metro Police for the murder of Tupac. So it's a lot of current stuff that
was just a couple months ago, right?
Yeah. So we're giving the backstory on it, and whether or not there's real prosecutorial merit to that case, I don't know. I have an opinion on it that I'm really not going to say now because I don't want to get anyone mad at me. But I don't think it's such a strong case as everyone thinks. Yeah. So I have a guy named Gene Borello who I filmed a show with. Gene was kind of a low-level guy, a street guy, but a crazy guy who shot up half of Queens for about 5 or 6 years and did a bit of jail time. I have a girl whose parents I arrested and got sentenced to multiple life sentences. She agreed to come on and speak to her life without her parents. I have another show with a famous prosecutor from the Manhattan DA's office who had really, really top news-noteworthy, shocking kind of cases during the violent era of New York in the early 90s. I have several people coming out to do shows. I'm going to travel some of them. Guys like Michael Frances, who I've known for years, agreed to do something with me. I don't know.
Michael's huge, right?
Michael's huge.
I remember seeing his stuff, I feel like 6-7 years ago. He's everywhere.
So I met Michael about, I think around 2010. I was retired. He had been out of prison and was no longer in that life. And so it was nice to meet someone on those terms. And I appeared on a television show that he had called The History of the Mafia. And so he was a nice guy. And then I watched him take a career as a born-again Christian who would do speaking engagements at various ministries around the country. There were men's meetings, and he was sharing his experience and his faith to different men around the country. And, he made good money on his speaking engagements, and then he started to address his past life.
Now, you didn't know Michael while he was an active criminal?
No. I had some cases going on Michael's brother, John. That's another story. I did a lot of work out in L.A., but, yeah, Michael's one of those guys. He legitimately, changed his life. His story is too long to tell, but he's a very likable guy. He's a smart guy. He's a great public speaker. Really, really good guy. So if a guy like that can get, his shit together, anybody can, And
he's confirmed to come on your show?
Yeah. Well, we texted each other back and forth, and yeah, we're going to do something. Michael he's the top of the game. So, I'm beholden to whatever he wants. He doesn't need me. I need him. So yeah, hopefully he'll be gracious with his time.
All of his content is great.
Yeah, we do have a relationship, from the past, doing some work together on a documentary. And real good guy. Did I tell you about Anthony Ruggiano? I have coming out on the 22nd of February. We're going to do the podcast at Church Studios And after it's over, we're going to do a live event at the Venue Shrine on the 22nd. Doors at 7, show at 8, and I'm just gonna interview Anthony about his life in the Gambino crime family. He's another guy, not a born again per se, but a guy who had a life with addiction issues, who embraced Narcotics Anonymous, became an alcoholism and drug counselor, and speaks about his past and his cooperation with the government during an era of the mafia where they no longer protected you, your family. They didn't help anybody out and caused him, his back was against the wall, and he basically cooperated to save his life and his family. So, a lot of interesting stuff. Now, I have a lot of people on the back burner too, really interesting, really violent guys who want to come on. Detective I used to work with, I told him I was moving out to Tulsa, and he said, my family is originally from Tulsa, and their business was burnt down. His name was Wendell Stratford, and his family owned the Stratford Hotel over at Black Wall Street, and it was burnt down during the race massacre. And Wendell's going to come out and talk about his career in the doing mostly cold cases. Had a lot of real big time cases. A really great detective, good guy. So, it's varying. I'm not just covering the theme of mobsters and cops, and too, we're willing to take a step towards some of the other things that are going on out there, as long as they're interesting and as long as I can get a tie to organized crime or just crime, I'll be happy. And so. I got a real big rapper who says he might do it. I'm in negotiations.
Can you give names?
I can't give the name because, one, if he doesn't show up, I'm going to feel like a fool. And two, I don't think he wants anyone to know, because if he decides not to do it, it might be a thing where, he just wouldn't want anyone to know.
Big rapper currently or previous?
I don't know what he does these days, but one of the most famous guys, yeah. So, I'm gonna make that a big secret, so everyone's gonna have to watch my podcast, right? So,
I want to ask before we go too deep. You said that because I saw tickets for the previous one. I felt like it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But you're doing a podcast yourself and then interviewing them in front of a live audience after with just a little Q&A? Is that how that works?
Yeah. So we do the video podcast, and we did. Then we pick a venue. And do something similar to, it's not filmed or recorded, but we do something similar where I'll interview them and have a conversation with them, and then we offer the audience a Q&A period where they can ask some really good questions, and they'll get like honest responses, and everything you needed to know about the Italian mafia, this guy knows. So he was born into it. His father was fat.
And this is coming up when?
This is coming up on the 22nd, February 22nd at the Shrine.
Where can we get tickets?
Tickets, you can go on the Shrine's website, and they're on sale through I think it's like Subway or something. But yeah, just go to the Shrine's website. And his name is Anthony Ruggiano.
And is this your first one with a live audience?
This is going to be my second live audience, but my first Italian American member of La Cosa Nostra. Yeah, and this is going to be the first live public viewing for that.
Because there's some podcasts where they do it live, but there's an audience while they do the podcast, so I wasn't sure. So
I don't like that. The sound is always a little off.
Sure.
But so that's why I like I like watching podcasts with the video is nice, the sound has to be good, the background helps, and so the places I've been doing it fit all those needs. But Church Studios is such a cool place, and they've been really good to me. So I love those guys, and and my friend Donnie owns the Shrine, and I had filmed the first 2 episodes there with my own crew, and it gets really expensive. And so I found a better home.
So the 20th, is that a Thursday night, it looks like?
That is a Thursday night. Yeah, 7 o'clock. I think it's 10 tickets at 10 online, 15 at the door. We may have if Anthony is up to it, we're definitely going to offer a meet and greet, pictures together, whatever. He has a huge following. So if you have a chance, look for Anthony Ruggiano. And he has, I think he calls his show Reformed Gangsters. And so he speaks to other guys in the life who also, cooperated, started life anew. He's been on Michael France's show. He's been on Sammy the Bull Gravano's show and others. He invites other members of his crew, lower level guys, but guys who he worked with out on the street, who, they don't have anything to worry about these days. They chose another path, or the kind of life is over for them, so they can reminisce without really worrying. So he's an interesting guy, fun guy, and hopefully that goes well.
Can you talk about some of your long-term goals with that show? I know you mentioned trying to pitch that to maybe
make
it big and
yeah, I mean, you got to look for a TV show that has a TV station, cable station, production company that does stuff a little bit different than other people, like Vice TV maybe, or whatever. I have a lot of contacts out in Hollywood from my past investigations and just reputation. So, I want to pitch, like, after I have 5 out and shows that are out and being viewed by the public, hopefully get a good following, and hopefully they'll like what we have. But there's a good market out there in Patreon and everywhere else where people, you can give the people online the ability to ask questions and get answers and things like that. So either way, for me, this has been a lot of fun. I'm kind of revisiting the past.
Minus the editing.
It's not ego. It's not like I think I'm going to make money off of this or whatever. It's a lot of fun, and it's something that no one else is doing. So, I don't want to be a copycat, and I want to be my own guy and just take advantage of the stories I have. And once I start putting this rap stuff out, it's really going to be kind of interesting, because I have a lot of inside knowledge that's never been talked about.
I did want to. We were talking about it earlier. I wanted you to dive into that as much as you can. You were talking about sports betting and just some things that's going to maybe stir up some stuff, if you can hit on it at all. Yeah.
So, years ago, the mob made money with point shaving scams and things like that. And, there's if you can get to a professional ball player, man, you got it made. If they get caught doing it, they're done. So it's a little risky. But I had got information from a bookie who we had some evidence against, who was dealing with some people in the recording industry. I'm not going to say who they were, but he said on 3 occasions they made bets with him.
A bookie and someone in music?
No, a bookie meaning a guy who takes bets from someone.
But a bookie and a guy in the music business were making bets against each other?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And, so they were betting the over on some basketball games, and they have to score a certain amount of points. If you bet the points on it, the over, whatever it is, they, let's say it's a combination, 200 points. I forget how, exactly how the scam worked. But I came across it in my folder, and it's basically getting famous ball players to score as many points as they can to hit that goal, that amount of points they need. And if the bookie told us, if we pulled the actual events, the games, the footage, you will see that a team with a healthy lead, who really can ride out the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, you will see certain players running back and forth as fast as they can, trying to hit the points. So these guys get it. And when they did hit the points, one ran by them and made the sign, the gang kind of sign that they use. Another guy apparently jumped up in the stands and hugged them, or you see them hugging each other in the audience. They just hit big on their bets.
Really?
And so...
Is this in the 90s?
I would say early 2000s, maybe. Yeah. So,
Could you show me on YouTube? Could you show me?
no, I don't. I've never got the footage.
Oh, so they're just talking about it.
Yeah,
But you never saw. You had,
I'll get. If somebody with more time than I have, maybe they can go find the footage. But
like
yeah,
maybe off record, tell me a game or something I could look up.
Yeah.
It might be kind of hard. It'd be easier nowadays, but
well,
that'd be interesting to see.
Yes and no, but somebody always has footage somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You might have to pay for it or something to get it, but I'm sure it's out there.
Do you think with legalized sports betting that stuff is kind of dying off a lot more than it used to be? Because now you can bet legally in like half the U.S.
Well, no, I mean it's not so much that.
Well, it's not the bet; it's the
not
fixing.
The bet, it's the how to manipulate it.
Do you think that's still alive and well?
I would assume so. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it ever was at any. I don't think it's widespread, but you'll hear all the time people have these conspiracies, whether they're true or not, that, when a football team hits those last few points, like why did they need to do it? Or, whatever. People see things that maybe I don't or you don't. Or
when you watch some of those games and you see the lines, I don't know. It's a little tough, man. It gets a little hairy.
Yeah, I think when something's obvious, I don't believe it. But that's me. And, yeah, give me some evidence and I'd be glad to talk about it. But,
So I had a guy on my show. Are you an MMA guy at all?
I know a lot about it. I know about the startup of MMA. I was actually asked to look into the guys who started it out in, I think it was Vegas years ago, because everyone thought they were organized crime guys, and they really weren't. So
is it the Fertittas?
Yes. Everyone thought because of their name and everything else, they had to be mobsters. And somebody, I think they were investing money in it or whatever. And I got a call from some guys who represented them and wanted me to ask around through the organized crime world if they were anybody. And the answer was no.
So they're, to my knowledge, filthy rich from owning they own multiple casinos. They own station casinos in Vegas, which is like a dozen properties.
Well, and that's always been one of those things. If you're involved in casinos, you have to be organized crime. But that's not true, because the gaming commission in Vegas does a very good job vetting people's licenses and stuff. But if you put it all together and you're gonna dump money into a company and go, oh yeah, these guys own casinos and this is their name, and you want to do your due diligence that you're not being robbed by somebody. This isn't a fake investment.
So they checked out clean.
But anyway, yeah, going back to the MMA,
Yeah. So through a friend of a friend I had on the podcast and met several years ago, I had a guy on the show that I followed for a while, former fighter, got into sports betting, and this is where it gets hairy, because was public with it, and was still an active fighter. And fighting, it's not like football. Mm-hmm. You don't have a game every Sunday. You could fight once a year. You could fight once every 6 months.
Sure.
So he was a active fighter on the back end of his career, but he also owned a gym and was a coach, a very prominent coach. He was on The Ultimate Fighter years ago. So starts talking about betting, talking about who to bet on fighters, very public, which it seemed like, NFL guys are getting popped for betting and they're getting suspended. NBA guys are doing it. College guys are getting caught betting on the phone and they can't do it. Well, in MMA and UFC, it seemed like this gray area, because, Floyd Mayweather bets on boxing all the time, or he used to. I don't know if he does anymore.
Right.
But fighters were betting on it as well, and it seemed like it was okay. They were, it was on their YouTube. It didn't seem like a big deal. Well, when it got to be a big deal for James, who I've had on the podcast, who's obviously he's now went off the record because he's probably still under investigation. But he started like a streaming service where you can a Discord, like kind of like a group chat. Charging $20 a month for betting tips.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed gray because he's a coach and coaches active fighters and still knows the game, right? But it was still public. Well, it got hairy whenever one of his fighters seemed to go into the fight hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And the commissions, whatever you call them, the gaming commissions, after the fight had happened, noticed a huge swing and influx of bets on the fight, specifically to end a certain way, which is in round one and by KO, TKO. So James's fighter goes in there and loses in like 50 seconds. if you go back and watch the clip, which I could show you this one,
Right.
looks like he's hurt, doesn't look like he really tries a lot, loses in 50 seconds. So they go back and watch the tape, and they look at all these bets. I guess there was a very, very large number on, and this was not a big name guy. You know, you're not betting on Conor McGregor. He probably gets billions of bets. This is a guy on the prelims. So James, guy who I had on here a couple years ago, who I was very fond of, still am, but he seems to be in some serious trouble. Uh-huh. And that was the first, to my knowledge, one of the first bigger cases of an active guy getting caught and busted like that. And when that happened, a week later, he used to have a YouTube channel and Instagram. It's all gone. And that's been, I'm paraphrasing, but that's been almost 2 years ago, I want to say. And you haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Sometimes you know something happened, but there's no corroborating evidence, or, I had, we had to walk away from cases at time. We knew, we weren't going to be able to get what we needed to put it over the top, but, you revisit stuff. And once you get involved in these are allegations, but once you get involved in bad things, you never know if someone's going to step forward who can corroborate that information and, put you in a bad position 5-10 years later, so.
Did you find it interesting or watch the documentary on the NBA ref? I think he was an East Coast guy.
Oh, yeah.
Tim?
Yes. That's a while ago, right?
Oh, yeah. I think it was early 2000s.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
His case was interesting. Well, it's all interesting, but his was reffing, and then a guy was saying, he started out giving inside information in just stuff he picked up as a ref. He knows, hey, Kobe's playing tonight. Kobe's playing against the Knicks. Every time he plays the Knicks, they draw this ref. This ref is more lenient. He's more hard. He's going to get a lot of fouls.
Right.
It started out as little tips, and then it sounded like he started going down the deep end and got in. The way they caught him, to my understanding, was got connected with a guy in the mob, and they were chasing him, and phone calls picked up, and they said, why does this name sound familiar? They're talking about basketball, and who's this Tim guy? And they find out, and he's a ref. Right. And that's how he got caught.
Yeah, there's all sorts of scams out there. Henry Hill of Goodfellas fame was involved with one of the scandals with college ball in Boston. I know Michael Franzese speaks to it often. I think Michael actually years ago used to speak to players at NCAA. They'd sponsor events where he would talk to them and said, hey, you're going to be approached to do things, and if you do, you're going to ruin your life. So, listen, if there's gambling brings a lot of problems. You open up a casino, there's nothing but problems. You have sporting events, people are going to bet on it, people are going to try to manipulate it. That's just it. There's a lot of money to be made with fraud. So
your show, you've got 5 guys on deck. You're going to film it. You're going to do some traveling. And you seem to be having fun with it.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm calling guys I used to work with. They're shocked to hear from me. Like some guys you just never hear from again because I dealt with so many people. So I have an FBI agent who's going to come out and do the show. He was a behavioral science guy doing like serial killers at the end of his career. I got one of the most violent hitmen in the history of the Black Mafia in New York who's going to come out. Just so much good stuff.
Can you give a name there or no name? No name yet?
I'm not going to put his name out there yet because I think he would want to promote it before I did. So
how is a guy like that still in the streets? How is he? He had
a cooperation agreement. I think even though with his cooperation agreement he had to do about 20 years. He was a really really bad guy. But he's out of jail a while now. He's probably my age. He's been out of jail I don't know how many years, and he's not doing anything. So meaning he's not, committing crimes. So.
Yeah. When you say you maintain a relationship with these guys, how does that work? How do you maintain
they put their phone number in their phone. I have theirs, and sometimes things come up, and you're like, hey, let me ask him if he knows. Sometimes, I just want to know what's going on, and a lot of times they've lost their contacts to the street. You know, they can't go back, whatever. And if you want to talk to somebody about the old days or whatever, it only makes sense. But just sometimes I'll have a conversation with somebody, maybe from law enforcement, an old partner or something, and we're like, hey, whatever happened? Do you remember? Maybe we'll have an argument over the way something went down. And I'll call one of these guys and, hey, how did this thing go again? So I'd say about half the guys I arrested went back to crime. But the guys who didn't were more sophisticated. And yeah, so like I said, we're all the same. You know, we all have the same goals in life. We want to be taken care of financially. We want, you know, nothing but good things for our family and friends. And, you know, that's the meeting ground right there. And you'll find that you have a lot more in common with these people than you would think. It's just that for whatever reason, and probably for particular reasons, we've chosen other paths, or we've been fortunate enough to have been, you know, gifted with a better life, better opportunities. So, but yeah, so the show is, you know, any member of organized crime, you know, Italian guys, black guys, Mexican gangs, I don't care who it is. I'd love to have anybody on the show. I'd love to, you know, just talk about the life. And, you know, the past was, you know, the era I come out of in New York was the most violent in the history of New York City.
You said it was
in
like
91,
2,000 homicides or something like that?
Well, I think in 91 we had about 2,225. Now, if you had that many people killed, right? So if you had, you know, let's just say 2,200, how many people got shot and lived? The surgeons we had in the emergency rooms were unbelievable. They had such great experience in New York. So a lot of people survived shootings. Robberies were off the hook, you know. It was a bad place. So nowadays I look and, like, you know, it's nothing. You would have the impression that it's like New York City and Frisco and those places like the worst places in the world, and they're really not. The problem is it's all this low-level petty crime that district attorneys refuse to prosecute, whether it's these guys who run in and do hits on jewelry stores and high-end clothes in places like Nordstrom's, or these street people who are living out in their own filth in Frisco and L.A. It's the quality of life that is horrible, and it kills big cities, it kills commerce. And it's really the role of the district attorneys who refuse to cooperate and, you know, prosecute crimes that are really destroying places like New York. I hope one day it changes. So, but for now, yeah, I'm here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a very high rate of crime here, but it's all like in certain areas. You know, I've never really felt unsafe here. I don't carry a gun out in the street. If you come to my house, I have a lot of guns, but, and and that's how things should be, you know.
Are you a fan of open carry?
What's that?
Are you a fan of open carry like we have here?
You know, I don't. Yes and no. You know, I mean, I like to have the freedom to purchase a weapon legally, and have it without, you know, having to jump through a million hoops and a bureaucracy to get it, or being told, no, I can't have it. Some of the open carry stuff is a little over the top for me.
Not in Oklahoma, huh?
Yeah, you know what, though? I don't see it that much, but, you know, I see it a lot. Guys with empty holsters because the store they're in doesn't allow open carry. Yeah. So you see guys, let's say in like Walmart with the empty holster, you know, it's just kind of, I don't know. I think it's like a status symbol for some guys. Yeah, I got to.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
But, you know, I'm not particularly for it, but I'm not particularly against it either. But, you know, I've always carried a concealed weapon, obviously. So I like it better that way, you know.
I can't help but think what, you know, we have First 48 here, what that would have been like if you had that in New York during that time with 2,000 plus homicides. I mean. Yeah,
no, I mean, you might have 3-4 homicides in one police precinct in one night, you know. Some of these precincts were small, like 1 square mile. You know, you have 2 or 3 homicides in a night. It was crazy, you know. And yeah, I mean, can you imagine how you have a certain amount of detectives on deck in the precinct, and they're also investigating robberies, burglaries, all these different crimes, and now they have 3 or 4 homicides. Like, how do you keep up with that? So they were really difficult times. Cold case units that were formed later on were able to solve a lot of those crimes because people didn't feel as much in fear to come forward, or got jammed up and were looking for some kind of consideration. So we ended up backtracking and finding ways to solve some of them, but it was crazy. So.
You ever think you might have any opportunity or did you have any knowledge of at the time of Whitey Bulger's crew coming from Boston?
No,
or is that too far away from you?
No, but I do know a guy who it was a Genovese guy who can speak to being in prison with Whitey. But no, in New York, we call Boston Scranton with clams. It's when we don't think very highly of it. It's a big rivalry, as you know, with our teams. But some really bad guys in that town. Really bad guys, really violent guys. But no, I don't know much about it. I do know the story out here, but
yeah, I don't watch a ton of true crime. I mean, I do, but I don't. I'm not like a fanatic, but I did watch Black Mass a couple months ago, and it just made me think of it. So because those guys flipped, right? Quite a few of them.
Yeah, well, the FBI, and New York FBI was guilty of it too. They had the best informant, the highest level informant, and they wanted to keep that going. And then there probably came a point where like, oh my God, I've let this guy get away with so much. How can we ever prosecute him? I'll be exposed for letting him get away with this stuff, So I think that's probably what happened on a few of these cases. But there's some, I think it was Greg Scarper in New York. They found out was a cooperator for many years. It's something that and there's probably other incidents we don't even know about, other players out there. But yeah, don't know much about the Boston crew, but there's guys out there telling the story. So
it's good. Bill, I did want to ask a couple of questions too. I tried to cover a lot of them, but just a couple more if you don't mind, that were directly submitted. One being, you feel like most of the people or everyone you caught was actually guilty of the crime, or do you think there were some times where it did not match up?
So that does happen. Witnesses can be bad. There could be a misidentification. I did come across once where a detective had made an arrest. We didn't think that the defendant did it. We were talking amongst ourselves. I was in a robbery squad. We did pattern robberies.
What's a pattern robbery?
Like numerous robberies, and same guys, 2 guys, one guy's got a shotgun kind of thing. You put them all together. So a guy made an arrest. I didn't think he did it, but he was picked out of a lineup, and I ended up making an arrest with some precinct guys about 2 months later, and got the actual guys, and this guy was cleared of it. But what used to happen, and I don't know how they do it anymore, but we used to have a book full of photos, or we'd use a computer software and we'd load it up with different people. And, if people are trying to help you, they're trying to help themselves solve a crime, and sometimes there are misidentifications. And the way you present opportunities for people to look through these mugshot books and stuff, I think was probably responsible more than any other, of misidentifications. That would be the way it would happen. And I don't know how they handle it anymore. But, if you pick somebody's photo out and you look at the guy and he's just like an assault guy, he's a drunk or something, you'd have to say to yourself, this can't be the guy, so I've seen it happen, but I never saw it happen maliciously or for reasons like that. But sure, some detectives are better than others. Some have more experience than others. Some are a little bit too maybe aggressive and want to lock up the world. But you don't need mugshot books anymore. You just look for the cameras. So, but I've seen it happen. Like I said, it was nothing malicious. But yeah, sure it happens.
these two could maybe go together depending on your answer, but could you tell us about one of the biggest cases that you were most proud of solving? And then maybe who was one of the more powerful people that you worked hard to put away?
Yeah, well, I think the one I talked about before, the Supreme team, we did a RICO case on them. They were responsible for numerous homicides of their competitors.
Can you kind of explain in layman's terms what RICO is?
Yeah, the RICO.
You hear that term a lot.
Yeah, RICO is basically a racketeering act where people who have organized criminal, crews, they need special attention and special laws to prosecute them because there's a leader, there's a structure of soldiers and guys out on the street, associates, maid guys. They're complex. And when you're working for an organization, even if you're a guy who's just bringing in maybe the sports betting, and you're kicking up to the boss at top, you are part of an organization. And even though you're a low-level player, you deserve to be charged with a more serious crime.
So you're getting penalized.
You're getting
for
penalized
funneling up to the top.
Well, you're getting penalized for being a part of a crew, being a part of, you don't have to be the murderer in that crew, but if you're a part of that crew, you're all basically being treated as the same. You're being treated as an organization as opposed to, a specific act that you were.
So you might do something a little more low level, but because you're contributing to a bigger organization, you're going to get hit harder.
Exactly.
Okay.
So RICO cases they've decimated a lot of, the bigger organized crime groups in the country. They've used it with gangs. It became really popular. Giuliani started using it constantly when he was at the Southern District, running the Southern District, which is the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, I'm speaking of. So, yeah, it's a great, effective tool. And, if you have a gang in North Tulsa that's terrorizing people, they're having shootouts with other organizations, they're selling drugs to your kids, it's nice to have the ability to get them the appropriate sentences that they deserve, that you might not be able to when you just keep grabbing them for, selling drugs on the corner. They get maybe a year or two. But when they're also maybe stealing cars and they're also, doing some kind of fraud and whatever. It's one organization and the leader reaps the benefits of it. And, so they, if you want to be a part of an organization, you got to expect to do bigger time. So.
Oddest or strangest piece of evidence or clue that helped you lead to a large bust?
I can't. That's a good question. Yeah, it's little things. Guys in Baltimore did a search warrant once that involved an organization I had. And I asked them if I could go through the evidence that they had. It was a double homicide in Owings Mills, Maryland. And the guys were killed out in the street had a stash house that was part of an organization in New York. And they didn't have much to go on with the homicides initially. And we had information that it was a group that I was investigating. So I went down and asked them if I could look through the evidence. And we found a VHS tape, and I popped it in. And it was a woman speaking on the telephone with an old school VHS camera, pointing it out the window. And she's on the phone. She's going, well, he's outside now. He's in his car, and there's a barbecue. Get over here now, And in the background, you can hear like a television show or a radio show. I think it was a television show. And so it came to me that film, this woman was being paid to give a guy up whenever he showed up in this location. There was a hit team out there waiting for him to show up at different locations. She called her boyfriend, who was part of the hit crew, and said, all right, he's out here now, get over here. Oh. And they wanted it filmed. They wanted his death filmed.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, she gets scared at the end, puts the camera down. So
she was actually going to film the shooting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I figured out what the shooting was. And then my partner guy Tony Castiglia, was a really great detective. He ended up getting the television shows that day for when the homicide happened, and you can sync it with the camera action, and her guiding in the hit teams. So, it's just like one of those things like, you could put the video in and just like it's some woman, and there was a lot of nonsense going on before it where I could have just thrown it back in the box or whatever. So, yeah.
But you just had this inclination, you threw it in.
No, I just wanted to know if you find something in a stash house and it's a VHS tape, obviously, you got to do your due diligence and watch it. It's got to be something of interest. And, but I think I think I remember that it was a little wobbly in the beginning, where it was kind of like, what the hell is this person doing? And it was really difficult to listen to. But yeah, it became apparent after a minute or two that this is something I need to watch. And so anyway, that was part of the evidence, just one piece of evidence in a chain of things. We got some people to cooperate. And it was just another piece of evidence we needed. All these little things add up. There was also, with that case, there was messages back and forth to each other on pagers that, were useful too. So you have to know how to, you got to like subpoena everything, phone records, pager records. It's changed so much over the years too. Digitally now, you can go into a chat room on Call of Duty and make a drug deal. If you really were sophisticated, and who's going to follow you? The next week you pick another game, right? So there's so many ways to get away with things, and but if you have an informant and they tell you how they're doing it, that's half the battle. So if you get if you have a good team of investigators and one guy's got really good informants, guys are really aggressive and believe in going out there, pounding the streets and putting the hours in to get this stuff done. It's very rewarding. And, I was lucky that about 2 or 3 times in my career, I worked with really good guys, and I didn't have to so much rely on my own abilities, but have guys that were as good, better than me. And, you pick up so much. And, working with good guys and finding good teams is hard, There's always, there's some teams you could be in that, the boss is no good. There's a few people they brought in that are just friends of his and not his hard worker. Everyone's disgruntled. People looking to get out. And then you have a team of guys that are just on point, good boss, gives you everything you need. You have all the resources and you just go wild and you get everything done. And, you follow it through to the end with convictions that really mean a lot to people. On one case, I got to call a woman on the phone whose son was killed, and his son read a letter at the sentencing that was very heartfelt and, some closure for them. To me, if somebody hurt somebody in my family, I'd want revenge. I want something to happen to those people. I want them to pay with their, the death penalty, years in prison. And that's not for us to say, that's for the courts to say, but it's nice to be able to bring about closure for people, a successful prosecution, and get people out of the neighborhoods and areas that they're are suffering under these guys,
Yeah, absolutely. Last question I had, could you tell us about one of the more intense moments that you've had in your career?
Intense. Oh man, we could be here for an hour. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm going to tell you my first arrest, which is the greatest story in the world.
The first one was the best one?
My first arrest I ever made. 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, Times Square area, 1984. Really bad. Times Square is one of the worst places in New York City at the time. Hookers, transvestites, teen prostitutes, robbers, scammers, drunks, the people that like that kind of stuff, sex clubs and porn theaters. It's just a really bad place, but very colorful and crazy and a great place to get, experience. So I'm working with an old timer and he tells me, we're on a foot post, tells me, do not touch that radio. Don't go running anywhere without me. Just stay with me. Follow my lead. So we're standing there, we're just talking, and he says, "Listen."
Sounds like training day.
Yeah, so he said, "I'm going to go across the street and get some coffee, and I'll be right back. You want anything? No. All right, I'll be right back. Don't do anything. Don't go anywhere." I watch him cross the street. He goes into this coffee shop, and all of a sudden I hear these screams. I run around the corner. I don't listen to him. I run around the corner, and there is a guy. There's like a 6 foot tall black transvestite, about, like I said, 6 foot, huge guy, stabbing a guy in his hands, like he has his hands up deflecting the knife. Sees me and takes off running, and I get on the radio. I'm running away. I'm running away from my, senior officer, and screaming into the radio as I run, and I end up in a bar that I don't even know where I am. And it's a transvestite bar. So I run in, and there's about 20 transvestites and their admirers in this funky little bar. And I see a transvestite in the corner breathing heavy, and I know I got my guy. When I try to make the arrest, the other transvestites surround me. Now I'm like, you know what? I mean, my first day, if I get beat up, well, my first week, whatever it was, if I get beat up by transvestites, it's not going to be the good start, of a career. And so anyway, a guy steps forward and starts pushing people back, helping me. I'm holding on to this guy. And all of a sudden, the door kicks open to the bar, and the boys come in, and wigs are flying, bodies are flying out. I am rescued. I make my arrest, and
wigs are flying.
And then going back to the police station and have to search. A guy with 40D breasts and a penis that could get him into porn movies was an odd experience for a young guy. And I later found out that the black guy who stepped forward to help me in that bar was a retired boxer named Emil Griffin. And Emil was a gay guy who was in the closet, didn't want to come out. I guess Emil was in the 60s, 70s at his height in boxing in the 1960s or 70s. Anyway, he was taunted about his homosexuality, and he went into the ring and actually beat his opponent to death. He was so angry. If you look it up, you'll see the information. So Emil helped me out. Later on, and show you how crazy New York was, Emil walked into a bank with a note to rob the bank, and they couldn't read it, and they threw him out of the bank. So the cops grabbed him a block or two away, and it was like, they couldn't read the note, and they were just like, all right, get out of here, Emil. So he was a down out alcoholic guy but he saved my ass for a few minutes. I would have taken a pounding until those guys found me, and so and then it was a good lesson, don't know where you're at. You start running down streets, you don't even know where you're at. How are you going to get help when you need it? And, picking your corner. I should have just opened that door. I saw my guy, stopped back, got on the radio. I did everything wrong, but that's how you learn. So yeah, that was the craziest night, I think. That was a pretty crazy story.
Arrest one. What did your senior officer say?
Yeah, he was mad at me, too, because he, he was there with the troops. So it wasn't like anyone was asking him what happened. He was like, see, and I was like, yeah, I get it. But then again, people like him said, all right, well, this kid, he's into it. You know what I mean? He's got balls. He ran in the place.
Yeah,
so we know he's stand up. We know he'll do what we need him to. Some people, too, like you run into guys, they don't want to make arrests. They want nothing to do with nothing. They just want to get through their 8 hours.
Write some tickets.
Well, not even that. Just like, they don't, they want to do the bare minimum. So, like every job, 10% of the people do the real work. But the patrol guys they really hold the city together. Those guys don't get any mention, and they have the hardest jobs going as the guys out on patrol dealing with all this craziness on the street level. Those are the guys who hold the cities together, and the detectives get all the glory. But, it's a tough job. This is a tough town, Tulsa. They have a good homicide unit here, good reputation. And,
I know they're hurting for talent right now.
Yeah. I mean, who wants to be a cop anymore? I mean, if I was going to be a cop, I don't think this is a bad city to be a cop in. There's lots of experience that you'll get here. Great homicide unit. I never hear too many bad things, about, any kind of scandals or anything else. They seem to all really have it together. And I know a couple of them now that have been here a while, and they're all stand-up guys, good guys. So.
And typically in the Midwest, South, you get a lot of support from the community for the most part. And I think that, the homicide team will credit here. A lot of their homicides are helped out by the community. We have like a 90% ratio or solve rate, and all of them typically say it's a large part due to the community.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit of that, but it's a tough job. Staying up late on those homicides when they first happen, trying to follow through so people don't flee, people don't get away, people don't get other witnesses to tell them not to cooperate. It's one of the toughest gigs. I mean, I did it for a little bit as a precinct detective, and your body takes a pounding staying up for days. There's a lot of dedication to that. It's unhealthy. You work late hours. Those guys deserve a lot of credit. And I haven't seen too many of the shows. I'm not big into that stuff.
I don't watch a ton either. My wife does, but
yeah, I forget where it was. Maybe it was on a plane or a hotel, and it was one of those 48-hour deals. And it was Tulsa. Every time I ever turned on, it was Tulsa. And you could tell, but these guys they got it together. They know what they're doing. They're good, solid guys. So. Can't say that about everybody in the United States. A lot of times, police are a product of the government that's, controlling the department. So, so I think you guys are in good hands.
Bill, I've enjoyed talking with you. You got through most of my questions too that I had submitted. Do you got anything else for us before we close it out?
No, I'll always keep you updated on what we got going. And it's called The Proffer Podcast. Right now I'm on YouTube, about to start on Patreon, building up my audience. Like and subscribe.
Are you going to do Apple and Spotify as well, just audio, or are you going to do mainly?
It is on audio. I use one of these apps that sends it to Apple, Spotify, and something else.
So, because I watched the YouTube, I didn't see it on Apple yet, but
it should be. I've been having trouble getting the word out because there's a basketball coach named Bill Courtney, and he puts out a ton of videos. So and then there's the guy, the professor, the basketball player. They call him the professor. He plays street ball out in the street, and he's like a showboaty kind of guy. So who knows? Maybe
actually, I think you're right. When I typed in The Proffer on YouTube, I think that was the first thing. So then I had to add The Proffer Podcast, and it popped up.
Well, if you look too at algorithms and popularity, and podcasts that generate income, they'll always pop them to the top. So while I'm getting my start, it's hard to get the audience. But once I start getting the bigger mobsters and stuff like that, I think I'll find my audience. And I think I have it more than just law enforcement. I have, like I said, I did the Sopranos episode. I found a girl whose parents, she was orphaned when I put her parents in jail. I'm willing to cover everything, let everyone have their opinion. I'm not looking to get into it with people. Your opinion is your opinion. You say yours, and I'll say my perspective on it. Everyone has the ability to speak. I just don't like to get into politics or political ideology and mix that in. It doesn't do any good. So it's The Proffer. You could look it up by The Proffer Podcast, and or my name, Bill Courtney. And going to be doing as many events as we can in Tulsa. Show's going to have to travel a little bit, but and then if you're really into rap and beefs and all the craziness, I have some really killer stuff coming out. So I'm going to try to get that out on, find my audience with that, because it's really going to be interesting to some people.
Well, Bill, thank you once again. Let me know if I can help in any way. I'll share your stuff, and then I absolutely will be in attendance for one of the live episodes. I think that's awesome. I think Lindsay and I would both like to go. So,
well, awesome. Thanks for having me. And I'll see you guys there. I'll comp your tickets, buy a beer, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right, pal. Thank you.